Kieran and Ian's tentative relationship had been growing steadily, their moments together filled with laughter, teasing, and an undercurrent of affection neither could ignore. Kieran had never been so invested in someone, and Ian, despite his reservations, was beginning to believe he might have found something worth risking his heart for. But just when things seemed to be heading in the right direction, an unwelcome shadow crept into their happiness. It started innocently enough, a careless comment overheard at the cafe near campus. Ian was on his way to meet Lisa for lunch when he walked past a group of students seated near the window. He didn't mean to eavesdrop, but his name, along with Kieran's, caught his attention. "Did you hear about Kieran Holt? Rumor has it he's seeing someone but still flirting with other people," one of them said. "Oh, please," another replied with a laugh. "Kieran's notorious for not being serious. Remember when he dated that junior last year? They thought it was love, and he ghosted them after a month." Ian froze in place, his heart sinking. The doubts he'd kept at bay surged forward, threatening to overwhelm him. Lisa's voice startled him. "Hey, Ian, you okay?" she asked, stepping out of the cafe to greet him. Her smile faltered when she saw his expression. "Yeah," Ian replied tightly, shaking his head as if to dismiss his thoughts. "I'm fine." Lisa gave him a suspicious look but didn't press further. At least not yet. Later that evening, when Kieran showed up outside Ian's dorm with his usual confident grin and a bag of takeout, Ian's resolve crumbled. "Hey, babe," Kieran greeted, holding up the food. "Thought I'd save you from another night of microwave meals." Ian hesitated, his hand gripping the doorframe. He wanted to let Kieran in, to believe in the sincerity he'd seen in his actions, but the voices of those students lingered in his mind. "Kieran, I can't do this," Ian said abruptly, his voice wavering. Kieran blinked, the playful smile fading. "Can't do what?" "This," Ian gestured between them. "Whatever this is, I can't keep pretending it's going to work." "Pretending?" Kieran repeated, his confusion quickly giving way to concern. "Ian, what's going on?" Ian crossed his arms, trying to put up a barrier between himself and the hurt in Kieran's eyes. "You're charming, Kieran. You know how to make people feel special, but I can't." He swallowed hard. "I can't go through what I did with my ex again." The mention of Ian's ex was like a punch to the gut for Kieran. He took a step closer, his voice softening. "Ian, I'm not him. But what if you are?" Ian's voice broke. "What if it's just a matter of time before you lose interest or move on to someone else? I don't think I can handle that." Kieran's chest tightened as he watched Ian retreat into his shell. "You really think I'd hurt you like that?" Ian didn't answer. Instead, he shook his head, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and regret. "I'm sorry, Kieran. I can't." With that, he closed the door, leaving Kieran standing there, the bag of takeout feeling heavier than ever. The next day, Lisa cornered Ian in the library, her arms crossed and her gaze sharp. "Okay, spill," she demanded, dropping into the chair across from him. "Spill what?" Ian replied, not looking up from his laptop. "You know what?" Lisa said. "Why did you break things off with Kieran?" Ian sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's complicated, Lisa." "Complicated how?" she pressed. "Because from where I'm standing, he's head over heels for you. Do you know how many times he's texted me in the last 24 hours, asking if you're okay?" Ian's hands stilled on the keyboard. "He texted you?" "Yes, because he's worried about you." "Ian, I know you've been hurt before, but Kieran isn't your ex. He's spent months proving that he's serious about you." Ian shook his head, his voice tinged with doubt. "You don't know that. People say things. They said he's a player, that he never takes anything seriously." Lisa leaned forward, her tone firm. "And since when do you trust gossip over your own judgment? Have you ever seen Kieran treat you with anything but respect? Because I haven't. In fact, I've seen him go out of his way to make you smile, even when you're being difficult." Ian sighed again, guilt creeping into his expression. "Look, Lisa continued, softening her tone. You like him. That much is obvious. Don't let other people's opinions ruin something good before it even has a chance. While Lisa worked on convincing Ian, Kieran was busy hatching a plan. He knew Ian needed reassurance, not grand gestures or dramatics. For the first time in his life, Kieran felt nervous, not because he doubted his feelings, but because he couldn't bear the thought of losing Ian. That evening, Ian returned to his dorm to find a small envelope taped to his door. Inside was a handwritten note. Ian, I get it. You're scared. I am too. But I'm not your ex, and I don't want to hurt you. I just want a chance to prove that what we have is real. Meet me in the park tomorrow at 7 p.m. if you're willing to give us one more shot. If not, I'll respect your decision. Kieran. Ian stared at the note, his heart racing. Kieran's words were simple but heartfelt, and they chipped away at the wall he'd so carefully constructed around himself. The next day, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ian found himself standing in the park. Kieran was waiting for him by the fountain, his usual confidence tempered with a hint of vulnerability. You came, Kieran said, his voice filled with equal parts relief and hope. Ian nodded, taking a hesitant step closer. I'm here. Kieran smiled, his gaze never leaving Ian's. I meant what I said. I care about you, Ian, and I know it's not going to be easy, but I'm willing to fight for us if you'll let me. Ian's throat tightened, but he managed to say, I'm scared, Kieran. I know, Kieran replied, his voice steady, but you don't have to do this alone. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. For a long moment they stood in silence, the distant hum of the city filling the air. Then, slowly, Ian closed the distance between them, his fingers brushing against Kieran's. I want to try, Ian said quietly. Kieran's face lit up with a smile that could have outshone the streetlights. That's all I need to hear. And as Ian leaned into him, their connection stronger than ever, Kieran knew this was the start of something worth fighting for. Kieran had always been the type to dive headfirst into the things he cared about, and with Ian it was no different. Over the past few weeks he'd peeled back layer after layer of Ian's guarded persona, uncovering glimpses of vulnerability and tenderness that made his feelings all the more undeniable. And now, with the chance to truly win Ian over, Kieran knew he had to make it count. But this time it wouldn't be about flashy antics or exaggerated dramatics. This time, it had to come from the heart. Kieran spent hours poring over ideas. Lisa had given him more insight into Ian's personality than he cared to admit he'd needed, how Ian cherished the small, meaningful moments and hated big public displays. After a bit of reflection and way too many BL dramas for inspiration, Kieran settled on something deeply personal. He reserved a quiet room at the university's botanical garden, a place Ian had once casually mentioned he visited whenever he needed to think. It wasn't flashy or grandiose, but that was the point. Kieran didn't want the spotlight. He wanted the intimacy of just the two of them. Kieran called in a few favors to arrange the space with fairy lights and candles. At the center of the room, he set up a table with Ian's favorite tea and snacks he'd mentioned during their past conversations. It wasn't extravagant, but it was intentional, crafted to reflect Ian's likes and their shared moments. Ian's curiosity was piqued when he found another note taped to his dorm room door. Kieran had been sending these notes for weeks now, a blend of teasing and sincerity that Ian couldn't resist despite himself. But this one was different. Ian, there's something I need to say, something I should have said weeks ago. Meet me at the botanical garden tonight at 7 p.m. If you come, no theatrics this time, just us, just the truth. Kieran. Ian stared at the note for a long time. By now, Kieran's persistence and sincerity had broken down most of his defenses, but fear lingered. Opening himself up again wasn't easy. Trusting someone again wasn't easy, but deep down, he wanted to believe Kieran meant what he said. At 7 p.m. sharp, Ian arrived at the botanical garden. The soft glow of fairy lights guided his path as he entered the room, the fragrant scent of blooming flowers, calming his nerves. At the center stood Kieran, looking unusually nervous, but undeniably sincere. "Hey," Kieran greeted, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "Hi," Ian replied, his gaze darting around the room. "You did all this?" Kieran shrugged, a hint of his usual grin returning. "I had some help, but yeah." Ian stepped closer, the warmth of the room and Kieran's presence enveloping him. "Why?" "Because," Kieran said, taking a deep breath, "I wanted you to know how serious I am about this. About us." He gestured to the table, inviting Ian to sit. They both settled into their chairs, the air between them charged with unspoken words. Finally, Kieran leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table as he looked Ian directly in the eyes. "Ian, I know I've been a little over the top since the day we met," Kieran began, his voice steady. "Okay, maybe more than a little, but it's only because I've never felt like this about anyone before, and I know that sounds cliché, but it's the truth." Ian's lips quirked upward, a faint smile tugging at the corner. "Coming from you, I'm not surprised it's a little cliché." Kieran laughed softly. "Fair, but I'm serious. From the moment I met you at that wedding, something about you just stuck. And the more I got to know you, the more I realized it wasn't just some passing thing. You're smart and kind and stubborn as hell." Ian arched an eyebrow at that, but his smile didn't falter. "And I get it," Kieran continued. "You've been hurt before, and you have every reason to be cautious. But I'm not your ex, Ian. I'm not perfect, and I'm probably going to mess up along the way. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn your trust." Ian's expression softened, the tension in his shoulders easing. "You say that now, but what happens when things get hard?" Kieran reached across the table, his hand hovering near Ian's before finally resting on top of it. "Then we figure it out. Together. That's how this works, isn't it?" Ian's gaze dropped to their hands, his thumb unconsciously brushing against Kieran's. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple," Kieran admitted, "but nothing worth having ever is." For a long moment Ian was silent, his walls cracking with every word Kieran spoke. He'd been so afraid of getting hurt again that he hadn't allowed himself to believe in the possibility of something good. But Kieran had been patient, persistent, and painfully honest. Finally, Ian looked up, his eyes meeting Kieran's. "You're relentless, you know that?" Kieran grinned. "Part of my charm." A soft laugh escaped Ian, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he let the last of his defenses fall. "You win," he said quietly. Kieran's grin faltered, replaced by a look of genuine surprise. "What?" "You win," Ian repeated, his cheeks tinged with a faint blush. I'm tired of pushing you away when all you've done is prove you're not going anywhere." Kieran's hand tightened around Ian's, a mix of relief and joy washing over him. "Does this mean what I think it means?" Ian nodded, a small but genuine smile lighting up his face. "Yeah, it means I'm willing to give this a real shot, if you are." The two spent the next hour talking, laying everything out on the table. Ian shared more about his past relationship, the betrayal that had left him scarred and hesitant to trust again. Kieran listened intently, his usual playful demeanor replaced by unwavering support. In return, Kieran opened up about his own fears, his worry that his outgoing personality would always be seen as shallow, and his determination to prove that his feelings for Ian were anything but. By the time the conversation wound down, they'd established clear boundaries and expectations, both determined to build something lasting and meaningful. As they left the garden, walking side by side under the soft glow of the lights, Kieran slipped his arm around Ian's waist. "You know this means I'm officially calling you babe in public, right?" he teased. Ian rolled his eyes but didn't pull away. "You're impossible, and you love it," Kieran shot back with a grin. Ian didn't reply, but the warmth in his smile said everything Kieran needed to know. For the first time, they were truly on the same page, ready to face whatever came their way together.